children of Issachar, which were men that had understanding of the times. Now, one of the first things I want to point out is that the children of Issachar is actually mentioned in a book of Revelation chapter 7. In Revelation chapter 7, the Bible mentions 12 tribes, 12,000 from 12 tribes, which comprise 144,000. And I believe that we must comprise the characteristics that's outlined from these 12 tribes. Now, one of the top tribes that is mentioned is the tribe of Issachar. And the Bible points out two things about these children of Issachar. The Bible says they are men that had understanding of the times. And then it goes on to say, to know what Israel ought to do. Now, let me pause there for a moment. And Brother Marcus brought this out in the intro. The understanding is something that we must perceive. We must, gather the intended meaning. Let me just say it this way. Sufficient information does not necessarily translate to understanding. They're not synonymous. A person could have sufficient evidence but still not understand. That's why the Bible said they have eyes and see not. They have heads but they do not understand. So these children, the Bible says, has understanding of the times. But it doesn't stop there. It also says to know what Israel ought to do. Now, my brothers and sisters, I believe with all my heart that we're living in the most solemn times. And I believe that the people of God in these last days need to understand the time so that we can, in essence, know what to do. Let me give an illustration. Suppose I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm trying to figure out my next move. Let's say I'm trying to figure out if it's time to roll back over and go to sleep, or if it's time for me to get up and prepare to go to work. What's the first thing that I need to check? The first thing I need to check is the time. Once I see the time now, then I know what to do. If I see the clock in the morning, then I know that it's time to get up and go to work. And what I want to share with us tonight is that it's time for us to get up and go to work. It's not time to roll back over and go to sleep. It's too late in the game, my brothers and sisters. We need to wake up and go to work. So these children of Issachar has understanding of the time. Now let me point out this. Jesus, my friends, is our example. And we're told that Jesus was never by surprise. In fact, his first message was the time is fulfilled. The Bible says, my time is not yet. Jesus says, time is at hand. He also says, Jesus knew that his hour was come. In other words, he was never taken by surprise. He always understood the times. My question is this: do we understand the time? Do we truly understand what we're seeing, my brothers and sisters? Or are we blinded? Now, if you check the pulse of this world, you realize that the world is not sleeping. The world is watching. They might not understand, but they're watching. They're seeing that something stupendous is about to break loose. Look at this. This is in the midst of a pandemic. When people are worried about the coronavirus, you see that the world, and by the way, as Brother Marcus pointed out, we're not predicting or prophesying or trying to conjure up whether it's, came from rats or bats or snakes or whatever it is. It's real and it's really killing people, but we're going to study the implications of it. But what I want to share here is that these people are rallying together, banding together in the midst of a pandemic, bunched up in crowds. Why? Because they have a cause that they're pushing forward. I want you to notice some of these signs. Human change, not climate change. One earth, one chance. And the world is saying this is our, you see that sign in the back? It says it's time. Notice that. This is the world, my friends. Now I want you to notice what the Lord said about this. It says here, soon strife among the nations will break out with an intensity that we do not now anticipate. The present is a time of overwhelming interest to all living rulers, statesmen, men who occupy positions of trust and authority. Thinking men and women of all classes have their attention, notice, fixed upon the events taking place about us. So they're saying that these events are not normal. They're saying these events are translating into something. Now watch what this says. This is powerful. It says they are watching the strain. Now watch. They are watching the strained, restless relations that exist among the nations. We have not only do we have the global climate change and all these things that's being pushed forward, but we also had the racial tensions and the unsettled state of society. And we're told that they observe the intensity that has taken possessions of every earthly element. And they realize that something great and decisive is about to take place, that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis.
Crisis.
We're told that the world is watching. The world is observant. The world realizes that something great and decisive is about to take place, that the world is on the verge of a stupendous crisis, which lets in again. What about the church? What is our condition? You know what our condition is? Watch what this says. You see that? That's the unfortunate condition of the church right now. And the prophet of God tells us in the book Evangelism, page 32, that the world is perishing in ignorance of God's holy law, and Seventh-day Adventists are asleep. We are fast asleep, my brothers and sisters, while the world is watching. Now, I'm not sure if you guys heard of this, but the world, since 1947, has something called a doomsday clock. A doomsday clock. Now, what is this about? Well, in February of this year, and this is before the pandemic came to its full potential, it says it is now 100 seconds to midnight. Now, I'm just extracting a few slides from a presentation that I have called Almost Midnight. If you want to contact us about the series that we have that actually have this message as a part of it in its full entirety, just reach out to us at treeoflifeministries.org or call us at 404-624-6696, and we could avail you to much more in-depth information as far as how all this prophetic, the whole prophetic year of 2020 come to full fruition. But it said it is now 100 seconds from midnight. Watch what it says here. It says the iconic doomsday clock, symbolizing the gravest perils facing humankind, is now closer to midnight than at any point since its creation in 1947. It says it's now been expressed in seconds. Then it says, as a statement is issued today by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists explains, humanity continues to face two simultaneous existential dangers. Watch what they say: nuclear war and climate change. I want you to notice those underlying words. Climate change. You notice those signs? Human change, not climate change. One world, one chance. Our common home. And let me tell you this, my brothers and sisters. I remember a few years back, and I think Elder Mason Sr. used to talk about this as well, how Al Gore started going around and talking about climate change. And I could tell you honestly, I did not pay it any mind. I did not. But let me this. We better pay close attention to the climate change push right now. Because we're going to show you very, very clearly, as clear as the new day in sun, that climate change is without question linked to how the national Sunday law will be pushed forward. Now it says climate change that are compounded by a threat multiplied. Then it goes on. It says we now face a true emergency, an absolute unacceptable state of world affairs that has eliminated any margin of error or further delay. They're saying we must act now. Now what? Listen to what they say. It says here, I'm going to skip this slide. It says here, doomsday clock now stands at 100 seconds to midnight. It says the most dangerous situation that humanity has ever faced. Now listen, now is the time to come together, to unite, and to act. Now watch. It says climate change just compounds the crisis. And it says if there's ever a time to wake up, it is now. This is what the world is saying, my friends. And the doomsday clock that they came up with in 1947 says, look, we are now the closest that we've ever been to a crisis. Now, I'm going to show you some things tonight, my friends. Pay very, very close attention. We're going to see where we are in time. Now, I grew up in New York City. I passed the street and saw this clock hundreds of times. Now, watch what this says. It said the New York clock that told time now tells the time remaining. Now, brothers and sisters, pay close attention to me tonight. Metronome's digital clock has been reprogrammed to illustrate a critical window for action to prevent the effects of global warming from becoming irreversible. And then it goes on Saturday at 3:20 p.m. Messages included the Earth has a deadline began to appear on the display. Then numbers 7, 113, 40, 07 showed up representing the years, days, hours, minutes, and seconds until that deadline. In other words, it is no longer saying 5 p.m. It is no longer saying 7 p.m. It is no longer saying 9 p.m. They said it is more urgent than just to tell a regular time. They said we're going to show how much time is left in this world before a stupendous crisis and these existential dangers break loose to the point where it is irreversible, my brothers and sisters. What am I saying? The world is saying we are near the end. Now it says we have 7 years, 103 days, and 15 hours and 40 seconds remaining. That's what they're saying. Watch. It goes on. It says this is arguably the most important number in the world. It says the most important number in the world is showing it's all about climate. Now, they have an entire website, Climate Clock, the world. And what is this website about? You can go and check it out. But notice, it says to avoid. Now listen, this is almost directly from the book of Matthew 24. To avoid famine, drought, floods, displacement, conflict, suffering, disaster. It says if we don't do something to band and rally together as the entire world in order to avert the climate crisis, they said this will be the results. Famine, drought, floods, displacement, conflict, suffering, disaster. My brother and sister, this is what the world is saying, while the church is fast. As it says here, for the children of this world are in this generation wise of light. Now my question is this: what about us? Brother Marcus mentioned it earlier, that we are not the children of darkness. We are the children of light. And the Bible tells us in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 that we should not be taken by surprise. Why? Because we are the children of light. We cannot, y'all remember growing up in New York. Let me just come out of the screen for a moment. I remember, and I'll come right back in, but I remember growing up in New York, and growing up in New York, I remember visiting some of my friends in the apartment buildings. And, sometimes I spend the night at a friend's house, and we'll, as I do the sleepover, I wake up in the middle of the night, to go get me a bottle of water, get some drink of water, And to my surprise, I'm looking around like, whoa, I start tiptoeing around and jumping over. You know what I'm seeing? Cockroaches. You know what frightened them? The light. I believe right now, the Seventh-day Adventists are like the cockroaches that are surprised by the light of prophecy. We don't know what to do, my friends. Right now, there's so many groups that have been contacting me all around the world, and there's a special group right there in Mariposa. Now, I'm telling you, my brother and sister, they're taking hold of this message, and they're taking it and run. And what started? It was this year. They saw the light of Bible prophecy. They did not understand of what to do, and by God's grace, they were able to contact us, and we're able to the scripture and show them where we are in time, but even more importantly, what we need to be doing. It's a group of about 100 of them. We need to wake up, my friends. Let me go back to the screen. My brother Martin, man, I'm fired up. So you let me know when you want to jump in.
We got a little time left. Go ahead.
All right, good.
Yeah.
Now, where are we? Let me jump back in the screen. Where are we with the climate change and the whole coronavirus? Let me show you something, my brothers and sisters. Let's go back and share my screen here. All right, are you seeing it full screen, Brother Marcus?
Oh yeah, looks good. All
right, so what about us? We shouldn't be taken by surprise. Now, I believe, my brother and sister, I'm going to show you the connection now because I was talking about the climate change, but let me show you something. There's something called Hegelian Dialectic. I'm going to show you the connection with the virus now and how that's going to link to climate change. It says here, and you watch, just think about the current pandemic we're in, and the reactions to the pandemic, and you're going to see how it lines up. Now, it says here, the Hegelian Dialectic, where the ruling elite create a problem, anticipating in advance the reaction of the population to the crisis, and thus conditioning the people to call for change. Now listen, when the population is properly conditioned, the desired agenda of the ruling elite is presented as the solution. Then, the solution they present is not intended to solve the problem, but to serve as the basis for a new problem or to exacerbate the existing one. When the newly created problem reaches the boiling point, it becomes the foundation for the people to clamor for change again. Now, let me show you the cycle. Watch. It says here, at the top, you have the agenda. And the agenda, a centralization of power. And this is something that by a guy by the name of George Hegel came up with many years ago, just watching society and how they move. This is the world, my friends. He said he's watching the world and their movements, and he came up with this dialectic, Hegelian dialectic. Now, watch. It says here, centralization of power. And then you have the thesis. And what is the thesis? The thesis is the first step is to create coronavirus. A problem is there. Then you have the antithesis, which is repressive police state, which is the second step is to generate opposition to the problem, which leads to fear, panic, and hysteria. Right now, we're in fear, panic, and hysteria, whereas the world is saying whatever the government asks for, we're willing to do it. In other words, in fact, some of them are saying, I want totalitarian executive orders right now because the government needs to do something about this pandemic. You can see the steps. Then, watch, the third step is a synthesis, or the fourth step rather. It's really the third, but it's four steps. It's a synthesis, which is the removal of freedom, transfer of power from many to few. Now, it says here, in the third step is to offer the solution to the problem created by step one, a change which would have been impossible to impose upon the people without the proper psychological conditioning achieved in stages 1 and 2. What would make us now, think about it, accept, as in 9/11, that we can be pat down and go through these advanced scanner machines and accept the advanced security that surrounds us? What made us do that? Our mind was programmed and conditioned based on a crisis. 9/11 was also a Hegelian dialectic. What it's causing the world right now to say, lock us down. What it's causing the churches right now, including our church, to say, look, we are not meeting, we're going to follow the government dictates. What is causing this? We have been programmed because of how our minds have been conditioned based on the crisis. Now, I'm not saying that the crisis is not real. I'm not saying that it's real. I'm not saying that the disease is not killing people, but I'm just sharing with you how our minds have been programmed. We accept wearing masks all the time. We accept not meeting even amongst families and so on and so forth. Why? Because of the crisis now that has been created is now programming our mind, and we are clamoring for change or something better. And that's why there's so many people that are saying we want, including our own people, we need the vaccine immediately. I'm telling my brothers and sisters, the crisis is about to boost. Now, when the coronavirus came, the world went to lockdown. It started in China. You can see on the screen the emissions on the top versus the emissions at the bottom. The emissions on top is pre-coronavirus. The emissions on the bottom is post-coronavirus. You can see that the air is pure and almost clear. So they said we see a connection now with being locked down and the climate. As a result of the coronavirus, we were locked down, and it was so effective in clearing the climate. It wasn't only China, also all around the world. You can see back and forth. This is before coronavirus, all around the world. Before coronavirus, during coronavirus. Now, as a result of the lockdown, we see that the emissions has cleared up, and as a result now, we have found a solution to the climate change. We need down. Now, as a result of the pandemic, it says here, it says coronavirus has shown that in order to averse impacts of a global crisis, world leaders need to come together to make bold change. And then it says the world has been given a trial run in global crisis management, and it says it shouldn't waste it. That's why you have the Pope and other politicians and other people that are coming together and saying, look, the coronavirus has shown us with great clarity. If you lock down and come to a halt and just stop, we see the emissions drop. And they're saying there is even a more dangerous situation than the coronavirus, and that is climate change. And they said the same way efforts are being put forth to avert the global pandemic, even more efforts need to be put forth to avert the climate change so that we can, in essence, protect our common home. Catch that, my friends. Brother Marcus, how much time do I have? Talk to me.
Oh, we got about 4 or 5 minutes.
All right, let me just run through this really quick. Now, so as a result now, it's not sustainable to completely shut down the environment, shut down the economy, because it's going to lead to an economic crash. So what's the solution? Well, a Baptist minister wrote this article. He says, I have a radical environmental proposal, a day of rest. And watch what he says now. He said, Last week, as environmentalists around the world celebrated Earth Day, I was intrigued by the potential for a biblical solution to the problem of air pollution, a day of rest. Then he says, now newly published information seems to bear out that what should be obvious, a weekly day of rest could help keep the balance in the environmental system that God established to sustain man's physical existence. And then he says, a day of rest is not a solution for the proliferation of the plastics in the oceans, but when it comes to reducing airborne pollutants, one day off in seven seems to more than make sense. It is wisdom from above. And then he goes on to Chick-fil-A. He says, look, it's not sustainable economically to shut down for, 52 days consecutively. Then he says, what if we do 50 days, 52 days a year? And by the way, how many weeks there in a year? It happens to be 52. So he says, if we can shut down 52 days per year, 1 day per week, then we can see that research has shown that just by coming to a halt 1 day a week, we can see an impact that it will have on the climate. So he says what we need right now is to come to find a point where we can stop 1 day a week. Then he says, look, there's some people that might be worried about how it's going to affect us economically or affect your business to stop 1 day a week. Then he says Chick-fil-A comes to a halt. They don't work on Sundays. And when they don't work on Sundays, they make twice as much as their partners. They're not their partners. They are their main competitors. And guess what? Chick-fil-A has 2,500 locations. They make $10 billion a year. Kentucky Fried Chicken, Popeye's Chicken, their two main competitors have 6,500 locations, and they make $7 billion per year. So in 2,500 locations, a third of the locations of Popeye's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, Chick-fil-A makes $3 billion more than both of them combined. And he said, look, if we just trust God and rest on Sundays as Chick-fil-A, then we'll see that it is a solution, both the economic change as well as the climate change. And then there's entire websites set up right now, my brothers and sisters. It says, is there something you can do about the environment? Nothing can be one of the best things you can do. 1 day every week, do nothing. This website is called Green. And then Biden, as he signed in, he says, look, when I come in, I'm going to make some exec orders. He said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get us back into the Paris Agreement. Then he says, my very first day, that's what I'm going to do. And he says, I'm going to do it in executive orders, which do not require congressional approval. My brothers and sisters, it is high time. My brothers and sisters, we need to wake up. My brothers and sisters, now there's so many other things taking place, Brother Marcus. Let me just share this really quick. Notice what this says here. This was written many years ago. If Catholics ever gain a sufficient numerical majority in this country, religious freedom is at an end. So our enemies say, so we believe. So in addition to the racial tensions, in addition to the global pandemic, in addition to the climate change agenda that's being pushed, in addition to the fact that the president, the Pope, pastors, Protestantism are all coming together and saying the same thing, Catholics are now the majority in the Supreme Court. It says, if Catholics ever gain a sufficient numerical majority in this country, religious freedom is at an end. Why do Catholics make up the majority of the Supreme Court? It is now 6 Catholics out of 9 in our Supreme Court. Nice. And one of them is an Episcopalian, which is pretty much the same as a Catholic. What am I saying, my friends? We are right time. Biden is a Catholic. And he received a congratulatory letter from the Pope. You know what the Pope, him and the Pope talked about on their first dialogue as he became president, and he received a congratulatory call. They talked about the global change. My brothers and sisters, it is high time. Near the end, Brother Marcus, I'll come back to this. But let me let you jump in so that we can do some more dialogue and as to what's taking place in this world right now. But we can see, truly, it is high time.
It is high time, my friends. It is high time. I mean, that was laid out very succinctly and in order. You know, one of the questions that came to my mind when you mentioned the Hegelian Dialectic.
Yes, sir.
All right. So now, right now, we have a group of people who they're saying, lock it down. Do what you got to do. I don't want to be sick. I don't want to die. And when people are watching TV and They hear the news that people are dying and their loved ones can't come and visit with them, and all of these bad scenarios that are taking place. That is tearing at people's hearts and minds. But there's
Yes.
still a group of people who don't want to relent. They don't want to be bothered. They don't want to be told what to do. And in my studies, in my looking at what's happening, I'm thinking something has to happen to cause that group of people to begin to relent. Their hope